Another way to mine even more creative possibilities out of simple harmonic movement is to use passing chords and bass movement. We can use ascending or descending bass lines, we'll look at both, to imply movement and sometimes use chords with those bass notes, but it's a nice way to get more mileage and more color out of some familiar chord movement. So here we're going to keep things in the key of C again for consistency, and we're going to climb up the scale in the bass using C, D, and then the third in the bass with the tonic chord to 4 to 5, and we'll continue. So let's listen to what this sounds like. So we haven't really gone anywhere. We're basically in C this whole way through, but we have some nice movement. 1 to 2 to 1, and then 4, 5, 5, and then 6, and then the 5 chord with the third in the bass back to 1. And again, these are alternating between dominant and tonic functions. The 2 chord and the 5 chord are kind of dominant type functions, whereas the 6 chord and the tonic with the third in the bass serve as home bass or tonic kind of functions. Let's look at the next example here. And we're going to use some diminished chords and use some chromatic bass movement and passing chords in this example. So here we have some diminished passing chords. They're chromatic chords, and they lead nicely from one chord scale to the next chord scale step, C to D and then D to E, with some chromatic movement in between. And I have a variation of this coming up later that's a little bit more jazzier, and a couple of jazz standards like Ain't Misbehavin' and Makin' Whoopee are based on these types of chord progressions. So this is another nice way to vary and get more mileage out of some relatively simple harmonic movement. You can spice it up with some chromatic diminished chords to link up the chords. Let's look at the next example here. And another thing you can use this type of device for is to elongate your chord progressions. Now, for example, here I am just using 1, 4, 5, but I'm having them twice as long. I'm having a whole bar of C, a whole bar of F, a whole bar of G, and then a whole bar of C again. But it doesn't sound too static because there's movement in the bass. Reminds me a little bit of Matilda or Yellowbird with that kind of bass movement. Now in this example, I'm combining that scale-wise bass movement with some chromatic passing chords for a nice progression. And this is F major 7 to G, by the way. Got a little bit cluttered over there. So let's listen to this. So we've got a lot of nice little devices going on here. We got 1 to 1, 7 to 4, which is a bluesy kind of gospely kind of thing. 1, 1, 7 with the third in the bass to 4, so you get the nice bass movement and the nice dominant to tonic resolution. And then sharp 4 diminished to 5, and then sharp 5 diminished up to the 6 chord. So a lot of nice little interesting movement going on here. And then we go back and do some stepwise climbing up the scale. So nice way of mixing different devices together. Let's continue and look at the next example here. And this is a way of using a descending bass line to generate some movement. So really all we're doing here is staying on C and then it's suggesting a C major 7 because we have that B in the bass, and then to 6, and then the 1 chord with the G in the bass. So it's a nice bass movement, C, B, A, G, C, B, A, G, repeated over again. And that bass movement is really what gives the progression its character, because there's nothing really that interesting happening harmonically in the actual harmony that's going on. So another nice way of using these devices to generate color and design to otherwise simple movements. Let's continue and look at this example. And this one is kind of a full section of a jazz type tune. This is what I was referring to a little while ago when I said using the diminished chords as passing chords, and it is a type of jazz form that's used in songs like Ain't Misbehavin' and Makin' Whoopee. You'll recognize it because it's a very familiar type of pattern, and it uses all the devices that we've talked about combined. So here we have 1 sharp 1 diminished, 2 sharp 2 diminished, that's supposed to be D sharp diminished, to the 1 with the 3 in the bass, and then the E augmented. This very nice movement because these have a couple of notes in common. The C triad and the E augmented triad have C and E in common, so there's really only one note changing in these two chords, so it suggests some movement, and it kind of is a tension, and E augmented could also be a C7 leading to the 4 chord, and then the 4 minor 6, which goes back to 1. So very familiar type of chord progression, but here you see all the devices combined. Then we're going 1 sharp 1 diminished, 2 5, and then we're back at home bass, and we do a turnaround, what's called a turnaround at the end, 1 6 2 5 to bring us back to C. So there you go. There are some ways of using passing chords and bass movement to generate more color and contour and design to your chord progressions.